Beth, do you do any scuba diving?
I haven't in quite some time, but
No,
I have.
I figure you're a pretty good marine person.
Mhm.
You know why scuba divers fall backwards out of the boat?
Oh boy, why?
Because if they fell forward, they'd still be in the boat.
God.
Oh, I've only just begun.
No, that was it, Miley.
Is this the dad joke portion of the meeting?
We do control the mute button, Miley.
Oh, I
And we
noticed
will
that.
use it.
Don't make us use it.
Hey,
It's
hold
not
it. I
here.
lost my screen here. Oh, I lost my notes. How do I get back to my notes?
Uh,
Hit
We've got-
escape. Hit escape. It should hit escape. It should minimize your screen, and then you should be able to see your notes in Word. You should be able to see the word
Yeah.
icon at the bottom bar.
Where's escape?
Just it's
You've got, no rush,
left-hand
Miley. You've
corner
got
of your
15
keypad.
seconds.
or you probably escape. It might be in the right-hand area. It's around the delete area on your keypad. There's an ESC
Okay.
button.
That works. All right, we got it. Thanks.
Thank you, Stefan.
Yeah, thank you. Not that
Deb,
I
you
need
can-
notes. I never go by notes anyway, but
I know, I was gonna say, is that just the dad jokes written down? Because if so,
I know that's the part he's got memorized.
yeah,
it's the sad part.
the only part.
You can let people in now. I think it's 12:30. It sounds good. We got 50 people. And
All good. Great. Welcome. We're gonna give everybody a few minutes, a few seconds actually, just to settle down. We've got a good sized crowd coming in. All right. Welcome, everybody. We're so happy you were able to join us for this lunchtime presentation on shorebirds. Such an important topic for Connecticut Audubon Society and for Connecticut in general. And we're so pleased to be partnering with the Audubon Alliance on shorebird monitoring up and down the coastline in Connecticut. At Milford Point, we are particularly proud of the results that we had last year, and Stefan and Beth will be going through that. This is all possible because of your support. Our shorebird techs go out and really talk with the public, increase awareness, monitor the birds, and share information back and forth from New York and Connecticut to make sure that these birds are safe and successful. Now I'm just going to go through some basic housekeeping for you. I think good portion of people have heard this, but you will be muted throughout the presentation. We'll be taking notes. We'll be taking comments through chat, which you'll find at the pop-up bar on the bottom of your screen. We recommend using speaker view. You can find that in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. That's for the best viewing experience. We will be recording the presentation, and the link will be sent to all program subscribers. Now I'd like to introduce Miley Bull. Miley is Senior Director of Science and Conservation. He has a long history of working with shorebirds.
Oh, thank you, Joyce, and welcome
Having trouble
everybody.
getting to you. Hold on a sec.
Can
There
you
we
hear me?
go.
Oh, you
Yep.
don't have to. You don't have to actually see me, but that's
We
okay.
see you now.
All right. All right. Thanks, Joyce, and welcome everybody to this program, which is near and dear to my heart, as it is to I'm sure everyone here as well. As you know, last year's breeding season started off as a good one for some of Connecticut's most vulnerable beach nesting birds. American oystercatchers, piping plovers, least terns, etc. Anyway, started that way, but as time went on, people began to intrude on some of the nesting areas, resulting in many of the birds abandoning their nests and leading to a large percentage of nest and chick losses, particularly among least terns and American oystercatchers. Anyway, our focus today will be largely on Milford Point, but also tell the story of the 2023 season for our beach nesting birds, least terns and American oystercatchers, as well as piping plovers and common terns. We're lucky, we have two of our top celebrities here, and I mean that, to talk about how conservationists are working to protect these birds. They'll discuss what can be done to instill sort of a greater respect for the wildlife among the many, many visitors who, of course, frequent our beaches during the nesting season. Critical stuff. First is Beth Amendola. Beth is a senior coastal coordinator for Audubon, Connecticut, and oversees Connecticut's American Oystercatcher project. Beth is a skilled biologist dedicated to the conservation and protection of our beach nesting shorebirds. Bold and unafraid, she is a hands-on, hardworking professional who does it all. From crawling through thorny beach brush, trapping egg-stealing rats, to skillfully captaining watercraft from kayaks, canoes, motorboats, and probably even aircraft carriers in search of nesting waterbirds. Nearly all the recent Connecticut coastal waterbird breeding data has been collected and organized by Beth and her associates. This woman is amazing. I hope you get out into the field sometime with her. You'll be impressed. Stefan Martin, conservation manager for the Connecticut Audubon Society, has handled nearly all Connecticut Audubon's conservation and research programs in Western Connecticut for the last 4 years. Devoted, stalwart, and courageous, Stefan skillfully manages our Milford Point Coastal Rangers, as well as regional habitat restoration efforts everywhere. He is literally our point person at our Stratford Point Sanctuary and does all the heavy lifting, implementing our numerous federal restoration grants, which are complicated. As if that isn't enough, Stefan's skills as a naturalist and educator are both celebrated and legendary. So Beth and Stefan, let you take it from here. Godspeed.
Thank you, Miley. Really appreciate that. I know I could second everything that he said for Beth. I don't know about me. We'll see. Hopefully I can live up to all of that. But thank you everybody for joining us today. As Miley said, we're going to discuss some of the 2023 efforts for our shorebird nesting season, discuss some of the disturbances and impacts that these birds saw throughout the year, as well as discuss a little bit of how we're trying to remediate or amend some of these disturbances that we've been seeing. So again, thank you for joining us. I want to start off just to explain a little bit about the relationship that a couple different partners have together, which have formed the Audubon Alliance for Coastal Waterbirds, which was established in 2012. Currently is a composition of Audubon, Connecticut, the Connecticut Audubon Society, and the Nature Conservancy, as well as many partners, including CT, Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. Without this alliance, a lot of this work can't be done. A lot of dedicated field staff, field technicians, and volunteers work together to try to ensure a safe breeding season for these protected species. So some of the responsibilities of the field staff and volunteers are to go out and monitor beach nesting birds and track the nesting successes, ultimately reducing human disturbance. That comes through educating the public, handing out brochures and educational pamphlets to them, trying to ensure that if they are going to be on the beaches and enjoying our outdoor spaces, that they do it responsibly. One of the biggest things that the Alliance tries to convey is that we want to share the shore with everybody, but we want to ensure that the general public, as well as some of the other folks who might be a little more experienced, are doing so responsibly. We also have beach cleaning days to reduce the amount of trash that's located on some of these sites, and documenting and reporting disturbance to these nesting areas. And here you can see some of our returning volunteers and volunteer training. Ton of dedicated volunteers come back year after year after year. It's quite amazing. Here's some examples of the field staff. That center picture, we're all smiling because I think that was before we put the string fencing up. We tend to take photos before the hard work, so we're all in good spirits still. And you can see Beth here on the bottom left, taking important measurements of one of the American oystercatchers. So, to break it down into a couple different items that are required throughout the year from our field staff and some of our volunteers, starting with locating pairs. Where are these birds nesting? And are they going to attempt to nest? Or are they just passing through? So you need a little bit of skill in learning how they interact with one another, how they interact with their surroundings, and what you're looking for a nesting attempt. Then to find nests, this is a real challenge. We'll add a couple of photos later, or show a couple photos later. They are extremely camouflaged, and birds don't read. So they don't know that the signage that we put up is to keep them safe, and they're supposed to stay within these areas. If they find suitable habitat that's outside of these locations, they will lay eggs. So it's up to our field staff and volunteers to locate these nests inside and outside of these protected areas, and ensure that we bring the fencing out to protect any nests that might have been laid outside. Track nest success. This is huge. We need to collect this data year after year after year. It really helps us to get funding. Monitor hatchling survival and track fledging, and then ultimately calculate the productivity at the end of the year. That lets us know how our efforts are making impact and how we're helping the population. Hopefully you all are familiar with these species, but if not, I'll go through them just so you can to meet our focal species. So we have the piping plover, American oystercatcher, least tern, common tern, and black skimmer. Black skimmer is one that we hope to see more of in the near future, but they have only made one nesting attempt in the state in the last 15 years. So our piping plover is a small shorebird. It's going to be showing up in Connecticut. We kind of have our calendar set for the next week or two. Generally, they arrive in mid-March and establish a territory pretty quickly as soon as they start to get here. March into April, their full clutch size is going to be 4 eggs. They're going to sit on those eggs and incubate them for 28 days, roughly 28 days. And then from the point of hatching to the point of fledging is going to be between 30 and 35 days. Our American oystercatcher, we've already started seeing these arrive in the state, so we're super excited about that. That means field season is starting now. So we haven't quite been out in the field yet, but we've been relying on some of these volunteers who have been out there already starting to report. So they'll show up now. Establish territory March, April, clutch size 3 eggs. Similar to a piping plover, their incubation period is 28 days, and they'll start to fly about 35 to 45 days old. Our least terns, these are going to be smaller than our common terns, smaller than our smallest gull that we have here, ring-billed gull. That bright yellow bill helps identify them. They start to arrive in May. Generally, the first week of May, we start to see them. They're colonial nesters, which is different than our American oystercatcher or piping plover. They'll lay 1 to 3 eggs, incubate for 19 to 25 days, and they will fledge at about 20 days old. Here's our common tern, that beautifully colored bill with that dark tip. They'll arrive around the same time that the least terns do, that first week of May generally. Their clutch size is 1 to 4 eggs. Incubation period is about 21 to 23 days, and they fledge at about 22 to 30 days old. I'll turn it over to Beth.
Great, thanks, Stefan and Miley. Thank you for that lovely introduction. So just to continue on here, so our birds tend to employ 2 different nesting strategies. We have our territorial breeders, which is our piping plovers, American oystercatchers. Both of the adults will defend a territory. They will tend the nest, defend it from intruders. And then we have our terns and the black skimmers, who are colony nesters. They will defend the colony as a group, any of you have walked by one of these colonies, you know they will try and dive bomb you to keep you away. So it's kind of a group effort to defend the nests and chicks. And as Stefan said, their nests are extremely camouflaged. Plovers tend to just scrape out a small sandy depression in the sand, oystercatchers as well. Sometimes they will line them with little shells, but they are designed just to blend right in with the substrate. Oystercatchers, when they're nesting on the island, sometimes don't put much effort into this, and they will find a divot in the rocks that seems suitable, and they will just lay their eggs right there on the rock. So as an example of some of the nesting locations, on the left-hand side in that larger picture, there is a piping plover sitting on a nest. We tried to blow it up a little bit, and you can see how well the bird just camouflages right in with the sand. And even blown up, you can see it still blends right in. Over on the right-hand side is a little rock wall there, and the oystercatchers decided to just lay their eggs right next to a rock. So you can really, even for the trained, seasoned professional who's been out monitoring, you can really miss these nests. They blend right in. So all the species have kind of different strategies for raising their chicks. So most of the time, both parents and the colonies will defend the nests and chicks. But where the difference really happens is how much care goes into a chick after hatching. So we have precocial chicks, which would be the piping plover. So as soon as they hatch out of their nests, they dry off within a couple hours. They can start running around the beach. They can run down to the water's edge and start foraging on their own. And alternatively, we have our oystercatchers, terns, and skimmers. They're considered semi-precocial. So the birds, after hatching and drying off, they too can run around the beach. But the difference is they cannot feed themselves. So they are reliant on the parents to feed them. And in the case of oystercatchers, they're extremely specialized in the food that they're foraging for. They actually have to be taught by the parents how to forage. And for oystercatchers, it can take almost up to as long as 3 months before the chicks can learn actually to forage and find food on their own. So even after these young birds can fly, they might not yet be able to even feed themselves. So as I mentioned, both of the adults will defend the chicks and will alert them of danger. Most of the time, you'll hear an alarm call. Piping plovers, some of you may have experienced, they will try and distract a predator or a human that they see as, predator or danger walking down the beach. They'll distract them by doing what is called a broken wing display. The bird tends to run in front of you. It will flap to look like it's injured to get the predator to cue in on them. And that way it takes the focus off their chick, giving them time to go run and hide. Oystercatchers do this similar. They will kind of lead you down the beach. They will kind of escort you, doing an alarm peep. So that way you're paying attention to the adult, giving the chick time to run and hide. So historically, most of our shorebirds and our long-legged waders were hunted for their plumage. You can see in the photos here, we have an egret, its beautiful breeding plumes, and then there they are adorning a lady's hat. This was all the rage in the fashion, late 1800s, early 1900s. A lot of these populations were just decimated. There was a report from Natural History Museum naturalist that sat in Manhattan and recorded all the species that he was able to see on ladies' hats. And he recorded 40 different species of birds just on the hats of ladies walking down the street passing by. So the demand for different feathers was so high that so many of our bird populations suffered. It wasn't just feathers, it was eggs and adults as well. If you imagine walking down the beach and you come across a tern colony, just all their nests, just sitting there in the sand, folks could just walk down and pick up the eggs as they went down the So historically, those are the threats from hunting and over harvesting. Today, some of our modern threats are related to coastal development and sea level rise, which is reducing the amount of available habitat, and then also human-related disturbance. So sea level rise, the low end prediction over the next 30 to 70 years, they say it will rise about 1 foot. If you look down here at some of these high tide roosts that the oyster catchers are on, you know, when 1 foot sea level rise, those areas are going to be gone. So this is definitely a big threat to these birds. A lot of the viable habitat is going to be shrinking. We're also getting more frequent storms. You know, just in the last, 5 to 6 years, we've had quite a few severe hurricanes. And then even with sea level rise and these storms, it increases the amount of coastal flooding. So in the average range of projection for the next 30 to 70 years, they say our sea level could rise about 1 foot. So on the right-hand side, this is 1 foot of sea level rise. These islands here are the Norwalk Islands. And at the very top right corner there, that is Kokini Island. That is one of our most important oystercatcher nesting sites in the state. And you can see with 1 foot of sea level rise, all of the breeding nesting habitat will be gone. So if our projections are mid-range and we get 3 feet sea level rise over that same time period, you can see how much more habitat we're going to be losing. And then our worst case scenario is our 6 feet of sea level, where we are going to lose the majority of our offshore islands and a lot of our coastal breeding habitat.
And what that also means is a lot of these birds are going to be looking for other suitable nesting locations. So they're going to be running into more and more human disturbances, having human bird-related conflict. Again, shrinking down the amount of available nesting locations for them. I tried to list as many of the human disturbances as I could. There's actually quite a bit more. But these birds are seeing it from everywhere, whether it's from the ground and it's from dogs or vehicles, whether it's beach raking that can oftentimes end up taking up chicks, or if there's a new nest that hasn't been located yet, sometimes they can be destroyed by that as well. Also, you have from the air things like drones, things like kite surfing and kite flying. Passive recreation like fishing, kayaks, and boating. Especially the kayaks and boats are able to get to some of these islands where these birds generally or wouldn't normally be running into as many humans as if they were using the mainland beaches. I added drones again just because we have that photo there, that lower left-hand photo. That's an American oyster catcher chasing away a drone. There was a specific instance a couple of years ago where there was actually a injury to one of the oyster catchers due to a drone. Then you have things like 4th of July, and not only do you have the impacts from the fireworks and from the loud noises and the flashing, but then you have an increased presence of humans that are on the beaches who are potentially drinking or needing to go use the restroom away from the crowds, who are going into the string fencing, ball playing, or other activities as well. And unfortunately, even activities that are focused around birds specifically can be a disturbance if not done responsibly. So that's things like photography, bird watching, and bird walks. One of the things that we've been doing within the last few years is we've really been making a strive to educate the general public on, if they're going to be out enjoying the beaches and these birds, how to do that responsibly, what times to go, what times to avoid. That's tide levels, that's time periods during the day, that's time periods during the year. All of those things come into play. In 2023 alone, we had 92 human-related incidents over at Milford Point. That's a lot. That's quite a bit. And as you can see from some of these photos, that's everything from vehicles to dogs. And again, we had the fireworks. We have staff that are out there every single day educating the public. We have volunteers who are out there every single day educating the public. And still we have these instances. We can't talk to everybody. That's why we rely a lot of the time on these dedicated volunteers to be filling in these places that we can't be everywhere at once. So folks like you who are going out and educating the general public, we hope to see less and less disturbances in the coming years from this outreach efforts that everybody is collectively collaborating on. Some of the steps, like I said before, that we're taking to ensure responsible enjoyment. One of the main things that we came to the conclusion of is we have to stop posting photos of chicks during the breeding season. As you can see from these photos here, they are adorable. Who doesn't want to go enjoy them? Who doesn't want to go photograph them? That can oftentimes lead to unnecessary or unintentional disturbances. Photographers sitting in one spot on or near a nest for extended periods of time could flush the birds off the nest and could open those eggs or chicks up to predation or heat exposure. We also make sure that if we have any rare birds that are showing up, like we had the curlew sandpiper that showed up last year at Milford Point, and that had a lot of folks who came to enjoy that bird. We made sure that staff was present to control the crowds and make sure that folks weren't getting too close to some of these nesting locations or staying back from the string fencing. So that's been really helpful as well. Again, we're recommending that visitors stay away from these locations at certain time periods. And again, that's with tides, that's with times of the year. We've had a great response with that. A lot of folks have really been perceptive to that. So we talked a little bit about the human disturbances. We'll talk about some of the non-human disturbances, the predation or predators. We have some of these trail camera footage or photos that Beth has provided through some of the work that she's been doing that she'll talk about in a little bit. But we see an American oystercatcher chasing off a crow from a nest location. We have things like black-crowned night herons that we wouldn't normally expect to be out on the beach that are potentially eating and disrupting these nests, eating chicks during the night. The obvious things like raccoons and coyotes, of course. Even great horned owls have impacted some of our least tern colonies in the past. That top right photo, you can also see fish crow flying by the camera with a egg fragment. Here's a couple more coyote photographs. That's one of the ones that we tend to see a lot of on the beach. Even on some of these beaches that aren't connected or islands that aren't connected to the mainland, these coyotes will swim out if they know that there's a viable food source out there. You can see that photograph on the left-hand side. That coyote is wet. He just went for a swim. And then we have red fox, of course, bottom right. Skunk. They're a predator as well. They love eggs. Raccoons absolutely love eggs. One of their favorite foods. Rats, this is a huge one. This is one that we're seeing more and more of and we'll probably be seeing more of in the near future as well. They're one of the only predators that are able to get into the piping plover exclosures. They'll fit right in between the gauge wire there, and we'll take the eggs right out from underneath the bird, scare the bird off, and take the eggs. Possums, they all also love eggs. They love ticks. They're great for us, but they're not so great for the birds sometimes. And we have, I spoke a little bit about garbage before as being an issue. Well, with garbage, then you have this colliding world here between humans and predators. This was over at Sandy Point last year. There was this barrel that was not a trash can that ended up washing up, and folks started using it as a trash receptacle. It looks like a perfect trash can, but because it wasn't put there by the town, it wasn't put there by anybody, nobody was going to clean it up. No one really knew it was there. So our field staff started noticing that there was a real problem starting to happen with the fish crows and other predators now coming to pick through the garbage and feed on any scraps that were put in there. And by the time that we were able to get a collective group of folks to get out there, and obviously it's filling up with water as well, so it's you can't drag it out of there. You need to you need a few different folks to come together to coordinate a removal of that. And by that time, unfortunately, it seemed like it was a little too late. So here's just a little timeline. This was one thing that we that really stood out from 2023 for us. At the peak of the Sandy Point least tern colony in 2023, we had about 140 least terns. Compare that to 91 adults that were over at Milford Point. By June 28th, the birds had abandoned the colony due to the increased presence of fish crows and other predators. And then you can look over on the Milford Point side. That same day, there was 85 least tern. A couple days later, jumped to 144 adults. Then it kept growing, 205, 260. Then at its peak, it grew to between 270 and 300 adults over at Milford Point. Because there was an impact at one of our other locations, the least tern then flew to find another suitable nesting habitat, which Milford Point, they decided to put down there. Unfortunately, we had an incident there on July 9th involving an ATV and an off-leash dog, excuse me. You can then see the following days and weeks after that, that colony also collapsed. And I also want to add that there's other environmental factors that go into play here that we might not be aware of, such as food availability that could really have an impact on this as well. But it seems like there's a pretty strong correlation between predator presence and colony abandonment, and then incidents involving vehicles and dogs, which they will also see as predators. Out of all of those birds, collectively, there were only 5 least tern that were fled from those 2 locations. So this is also just shows why it's so important to educate the general public why they maybe shouldn't be out there with a vehicle, why they shouldn't bring their dogs to these locations. Least tern especially are really susceptible to disturbances, and because they're colonial nesters, if part of the colony fails, a lot of the times the remaining colony will leave as well.
So Stefan has highlighted quite a few of the threats that these birds face while they're nesting, from, habitat loss from sea level rise, human disturbance of various types, the pressures of, predation, not just mammalian predators, but also our avian predators, as, gulls and fish crows also pose a threat to these birds. So what are we doing about it? So we're the Audubon Alliance for Coastal Water Birds. And as Stefan mentioned, this is a huge effort. This is a huge partnership between many of our, state organizations and our state agencies. It actually makes us unique in Connecticut. Other states, certain groups would manage their own set of birds, but here in Connecticut, we actually work together. And I think we're more successful because we are all pulling our resources and we are all working together to help manage and protect these birds. So Stefan has mentioned a little bit about our fencing. We mark off, it's string fencing. So if a predator or a human wants to get through, they're going to get through. It's called symbolic fencing. This is just to let folks know there's nests there. We've showed you how the eggs just blend right in with the sand. This is to give the birds a little space so they can have their nests, to protect us from stepping on them because they are so hard to see. And it just gives everyone a buffer. We put up various signage to alert folks. If you see that top yellow sign in the lower left-hand corner is a tiny little oystercatcher hatchling that is blending right in with the shells. So, this fencing really gives the birds some space. It gives them, a safe area to hang out with their chicks in their nests, and then also protects, people from getting too close, and potentially stepping on a nest or a chick. We also use the piping plover nest exclosures, as Stefan mentioned. These are to keep predators out of, the nesting areas for plovers. The netting on the top is to keep predators like fish crows and gulls out. And then a lot of the small mammalian predators Stefan showed from the trail cameras, they tend to like to dig under and will try to get into the nest exclosure by digging around or underneath. These exclosures are buried into the ground to about a foot, so they are a bit labor intensive for us to put in. And from our state guidelines here from the Wildlife Division, we exclose every single plover nest in the state. So if you think we had 79 pairs of breeding plovers last year, that's 79 exclosures. And if one of those nests fails and these birds re-nest, we have to put in another nest exclosure. So it can be extremely labor intensive.
So you might mention how the adults get in and out.
Yep. So I was going to say, so if you look over in the main picture where the exclosure looks all nice on the left, there is actually a pair of piping plovers right there in the sand. This gauge of wire is about 4 by 2 inches. So it's big enough for the birds to be able to run in and out. They can pass through freely. As Stefan also mentioned, the issue with that is smaller mammalian predators can also get in. So we have had instances in the past where rats are getting in there and they're eating the exclosure. Something like a mink would also be able to get in, but we have not been able to document any impacts from that as of yet. Over on the right-hand side here, you can see there are 3 exclosures that look in pretty rough shape. If you remember, a few years ago, we had a nor'easter in the beginning of May. Or no, it was around Memorial Day. And, we had the birds, they were all set up with their nests, and we had this huge storm come through, and it wiped out the majority of our nests, decimated quite a few of our exclosures. These photos are actually taken from Milford Point. So we would move these, and when the birds re-nest, we'd install new exclosures. So another way we try to help the birds is through education and outreach. And that involves either directly talking with folks who are at the beach, enjoying the beach. Most of the time, just educating people about the birds. We also do that through tabling and outreach events. I think most of the time we have problems. It's just because folks don't know. And, we love talking about the birds and telling people about the birds. And it definitely helps because once people understand, then they're excited to see them and want to give them a little space. We also use other methods such as social media at different times of the year. Another program we have is called our Wildlife Guards program. This is where we are employing high school students, about 8, and we have had 2 crews for the last few years. One is in Bridgeport, the other one's in West Haven. We are in development of creating a 3rd crew that's going to be stationed in Stratford. And this is to give high school age students the opportunity to learn, about our birds, monitoring, identification. They learn coastal ecology, and it's to give them an employment opportunity in the, conservation field, to help them, get prepared to go into maybe a program further along the line in university. So they also help with outreach at a lot of our sites as well. So we've been working on, for the last several years, a shorebird disturbance project in partnership with Virginia Tech and Manomet. So it's Audubon, Connecticut. Fish and Wildlife is also partnering. There's been about 7 sites along the Atlantic Flyway that have been working to collect data on the types of human disturbance that have the highest impact on our breeding shorebirds. The results of this study showed that just general beach walking from, humans and then also dogs on and off leash have the highest impact to our nesting shorebirds. So together with the Virginia Tech Human Dimensions Lab, we've been employing social science-based strategies that are designed to reduce human disturbance. These strategies are to use different methods to help folks change their behavior. you know, in a positive way to be able to share the shore. You can see in one of these examples here, we have an example of our movable fencing. It's different signage to let folks know, you know, about the birds and what we're asking of them. So in Connecticut, our nesting sites are very small. Many of you have been to the shore at high tide. There's not much room to kind of walk around except right down kind of the same area the birds like to nest. So our messaging for this project has been, you know, time your visit with the tides. At low tide, there's lots of room to share the shore with the birds, kind of stay at the water's edge away from the nesting area. And if, you know, flocks of birds are foraging at the water line, just give them some space, walk around them, try not to flush them. You know, at mid tide, try and stay in the wet sand. And at high tide, maybe avoid walking near the nesting areas because the water comes right up to that fencing at some sites and there's very little, you know, room to kind of share the area with the birds.
So this was a new development, which we're all very excited about. In 2023, environmental organizations requested that the Environment Committee of the CT General Assembly raise a bill to create the Coastal Bird Protection Act. So House Bill 6813 is an act establishing shorebird protection areas on state land. And what this means is now it makes it possible for the public to get an infraction if they are within 25 feet or closer, if they have a pet or other animal under their control. If that pet is within 25 feet or closer, they can get a summons. Or to operate a vehicle, which includes a bicycle, closer than 25 feet to a seabird or shorebird protection area. And this is going to be on state land. This is the first year that this is going to be implemented. And also, additionally, it would make it illegal to enter a properly identified seabird or shorebird protection area. So that's, we're talking about string fencing. So it's within the string fencing, person within the string fencing, a pet or other animal within 25 feet, or a vehicle within 25 feet. This is big. So we're going to be working very closely with local PDs as well as CT and Con to make sure that folks are aware of this and that they now have the ability to write a summons for this. So hopefully that'll give a little more incentive to not be so close to the string fencing or walking your dogs or having vehicles in the areas that you're not supposed to be having them. You know, despite the least tern colony collapse, generally 2023 was pretty productive, and we're all very proud of that. You know, we had a record number of pairs this year of piping plover, 79 pairs. And as Beth said, every single one of those plovers needed to have an exclosure put up around it, and that needs to be with the state and field staff. That's something that volunteers aren't able to do. So it certainly keeps our field staff and technicians busy. They out of those 79 pairs of piping plover, they hatched 107 fledged chicks. So that's a productivity level of 1.35, which is fantastic. In order to have a stable population, we need to reach 1.2. And we are past that. So it's great. And a productivity level, sorry, I'm breezing through this, is the amount of chicks fledged per breeding pair. So that's how we get those numbers. American Oystercatcher, that was another one that did pretty well this year, despite some of the disturbances. We had 115 pairs that were being monitored. 92 pairs were confirmed to be breeding, and that's the highest ever since that monitoring began in 2011. So that's another great success for the year. Out of those 92 pairs, we had 80 chicks that fledged, and that's a productivity level of 0.87. And again, that's a record on the year for 2023. Least tern, as we talked a little bit about, didn't fare as well, unfortunately. They out of 329 pairs, 22 fledged. That's 0.07 productivity. So that's 0.07 of a chick per pair fledged. That is not great. And again, it's a combination of things, other environmental impacts that we might not know about. that we're looking into more. Speaking with other organizations in New York and Massachusetts, and working to see how they're doing, how their numbers are doing, the efforts that they're making, as well as trying to educate the general public more about not being on the beaches at these times, or when to go specifically. But with all that said, we had the largest number of pairs in the state over the past 5 years. Common terns, they're generally going to be nesting on the coastal islands, but when you have suitable habitat, the conditions are right, we will have a handful that start to nest on the mainland. That could also be a factor, actually, believe it or not, and why least terns might have disturbance. Common terns are a little bit bigger. They tend to bully them a little bit, so that could also be one of these environmental factors that we need to take into consideration when we're looking at these numbers. So there was a handful of nesting attempts, like I said, made at the mainland beaches, including Milford Point. Out of 151 pairs, we had 216 fledged young for a productivity of 1.43.
So in 2018, we began American Oystercatcher banding project. So to date, we've banded 62 birds, and that's a range of adults and pre-fledged chicks. So the bands are actually allowing us to learn a great deal of information about these birds. So it's giving us an idea of how they're using the habitat during the season, their movements in Connecticut. From previous banded birds, we thought that, they would mate for life and they'd come back and nest together, which majority of the time they do. It's the same pair, but the bands, when we have a banded pair, we've been able to now see that the birds are switching mates and breeding sites more frequently than we thought. So of the 23 breeding birds that we've banded, there have been about 7 of them or more that have actually changed either switching mates or breeding territories. And then we have other ones that come back to the same exact nesting site every year and nest within 5 feet of the year before. So we're really getting some great information from the bands. Also allows us to track their lifetime reproductive success. So we can track how productive, how many chicks they produce every year. And that is, we get that ability when we are actually catching these young birds. So something fun that kind of happened at Milford a few years ago is we captured 2 pre-fledged chicks in 2020. We like to call them our COVID babies. We actually caught them because one of them had some monofilament netting on their head, and we needed to capture the chicks to try and get that off. So as a result, we banded both of the birds. They ended up fledging and did really well. They both were resighted overwintering in South Carolina and been down there for the last couple of years. So really exciting last year, they both showed up. They both showed up back in Connecticut with mates, and one pair attempted to nest at Milford Point, and the other pair attempted to nest just across the river there at Long Beach. So it's really exciting. So not only are we getting breeding behavior, but we're also learning a lot about migration. We've been able to identify 3 main staging areas in Connecticut, areas where the birds tend to group up before or after the breeding season, before they're heading, south or coming back. We've identified Westbrook Barrier Islands, Milford Point, and the islands of Westport are kind of our main staging areas for oyster catchers. We've been able to track their winter migration and locate wintering grounds. So we have birds that are banded in Connecticut that are wintering all up and down the Atlantic coast. We have birds that go as far as New York and ones that go all the way down to the west coast of Florida. And then really exciting, the last 5-6 years, thanks to some of our partners, local NGOs down in Central America, they've been doing wintering shorebird surveys, and they started picking up some of our Atlantic coast banded oyster catchers. And 2 of those birds were from Connecticut. And just this fall, some of their partners actually resighted one of our birds in Colombia. It's really kind of the furthest we've, thought our Atlantic coast population was going in the winter. So it's really exciting, and we're learning quite a bit about them. So the only way this works is if folks actually report the bands they're seeing. So, if you're out there, you see a banded bird, if there's other folks with you, let them know about the band, show them, let them know about the database. Once you submit a recite to the American Oystercatcher Working Group database, you will receive an email back after a couple days after they confirm your sighting, and it will give you a list. It will tell you when the bird was banded, where other places it's been. So it's a lot of fun, and you can kind of keep track of your oyster catchers through the database. So another project we started over the last few years is Oystercatcher Nest Camera Project. The project was started because we were trying to identify what's the major causes of nest loss for oyster catchers. Most of our oyster catchers, about 80% of the population, nest on our offshore islands. So some of these locations are remote. You have to get to them by kayak or boat. So getting there frequently is difficult. So we started using cameras on some of our mainland nest and island nests. We were trying to document, what types of predators were really impacting their nesting success, looking at different weather events, and assess the impacts human disturbance is having on the nesting success of these birds at different sites. So the project has documented many different predators. You can even see oystercatcher chasing off an osprey. So even other species that are not, a known predator, they're still, agitating the birds and keeping them off their nest. We also have documented a severe weather event. So this is a couple years ago. So that photo down there of the oystercatcher with the two hatchlings, they are actually the result of a nest getting completely washed over and moved during a severe coastal storm on one of the islands. The nest was moved about 10 feet away from where it originally was. And the next day, oystercatchers were seen on the trail camera re-incubating that nest in the new location. And then a week and a half later, it actually successfully hatched. So this is kind of a really good sign for these birds. As we are going to be dealing with more storms and sea level rise, we are documenting that their nests and eggs can withstand a bit of overwash. So what else we're using the camera for is, looking at predators. We actually were just working with one of the towns. You saw that lovely trail cam photo of the rats. We were actually using the cameras to document, the population level of the rats, what areas they're in, how many are there. And that information from these camera projects is actually helping us to inform our management strategies. Developing strategies, what sites we actually need to start, actually implementing something when things are getting, really out of control and we're having, nest losses due to a high population of predators. It's also letting us cue in what sites are having, really high amounts of human disturbance. Do we need to get more of our technicians and volunteers over there to do some more outreach to help give the birds a little more space to be successful?
So we want to end the program with a little call to arms. If this webinar has intrigued your interest in becoming a volunteer with the Alliance, we encourage you to do so. Email ctwaterbirds@gmail.com. We have our new volunteer training scheduled for March 26th at 6:30 p.m. So we look forward to returning volunteers as well as seeing all of you get out in the field and give us a hand with this great project and monitoring these awesome shorebirds.
Okay, so we do have some questions in the chat room.
Yeah, right, Miley, I've gone through them. I picked out a bunch. Hi,
Okay.
everybody. It's Tom Anderson from Connecticut Audubon. A couple of the questions had to do specifically with the topic you were just on, and that is the oyster catchers and the coastal islands. And Martha Rothschild wanted to know why some of the oyster catchers stay closer and others go as far as South America. Do we have any idea why they
Yeah,
migrate
so
to different places?
Airfare tickets.
So the oyster catchers that, we have here in Connecticut, they're part of the Atlantic breeding population. The stronghold of the population is kind of in the central area of the range. These are places like Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, where you see they have flocks of, 500,000, and they have a year-round overwintering population. So if you think about it, if these birds are going there to this very saturated, area of the coast to overwinter, there's just too many birds. They're fighting for resources. So they tend to think our more northernly breeding birds tend to go further south, because the central part of the range where there's a year-round population is, reach carrying capacity. So a lot of our birds are going much further south. We do have quite a few birds that go to the west coast of Florida. Is actually another really big wintering in Cedar Key. We have a lot of overwintering oystercatchers there as well. It actually was news to many of us managers and researchers that the birds were going as far south as Central America. And the South America sighting was kind of mind-blowing. But, as the population is increasing and growing, it's, we're going to be running out of suitable habitat. Winter, they're looking for food. So we reach carrying capacities, not enough food to sustain more than the population that's already there. So the birds are having to make that decision, whether to go further south or stay somewhere where there's limited resources.
When there's coastal flooding at a place like Milford Point, how do parents protect their young, their unfledged young?
Well, so something that I learned quite a few years ago, and it kind of blew my mind, is that oystercatcher chicks can swim. They will swim. So in severe coastal flooding, the oystercatcher chicks can swim. I've even documented a big firework display right next to an island, with a very young unfledged oystercatcher chick. And the next day, the pair and the chick were found on an island like a quarter mile away. So that poor little chick got in the water and they just kept swimming. When the chicks are swimming, the adults will kind of fly around and kind of watch them and follow them and protect them. But that is one of their evasion strategies. They can swim. They cannot fly right afterward because their feathers aren't equipped with that nice oily film that will allow them to just dry off and fly. So it does take them a little while to dry off before they can fly.
And, they are either precocial or semi-precocial, so they can walk around right after they're born. So ideally, let's use Milford Point as an example. When we have these extreme weather events, we do get washover, as you saw with those nest exclosures, but there are still dry pieces there that these birds might then utilize to ride out the storm. And unfortunately, sometimes they aren't able to make it, and we do have losses due to these storms and flooding.
Miley, maybe this one's for you. When least terns abandon a colony, does it make them more or less likely to return to that same spot, or in general to try again the following year? Do you know about that?
I do know that they'll switch colonies fairly often. For instance, we found that there was a big colony at Long Beach one year, another colony at Milford Point. When the birds at Long Beach got overly disturbed, they would move over to the Milford Point colony, and the same thing happened at Milford Point when they moved back. But yeah, they do have sort of regional areas that they do come back to and attempt to nest every year, and they can, switch colonies back and forth.
We had a few questions about other kinds of predators. Gulls, cats, and ghost crabs. Are those a problem on our beaches?
Yes, yes, and yes. So unfortunately, we have started documenting ghost crabs in Connecticut. We confirmed them last season or the season before at one site, kind of out east, but now we are doing more tracking and monitoring. We're working with the state. The state is actually working on collecting more data and trying to trap the crabs in the burrows. So unfortunately, ghost crabs have made an appearance in Connecticut.
Oh.
Gulls are a problem as well. Just like fish crows, they're attracted to garbage and human disturbance. They will take eggs and chicks. And cats can be a problem as well. I'd say we have had a few issues in the past. I know Stefan can say there was an issue at Milford Point a little while ago, but We don't have a major, and I'm thinking in terms of our colleagues in New York, where they have feral cat colonies, that some of them are out of control, and they're having a huge impact on the nesting shorebirds.
And those colonies are right near the nesting areas.
Yes, yeah.
I will add with the gulls, and yes, they can be predators. There is some recent documentation, however, that some of these birds actually do better when they're nesting near some of these gulls as well, is because the gulls are bullies. They're going to be driving off the predators as well. So as long as there's plenty of food for those gulls to be eating and it's not a young chick or egg, they're actually going to be helping to drive off some of these other predators.
We also had a couple of questions from two people who happen to be stewards for our Osprey Nation program. One of them asks if this is about a specific place, can a stronger fence be put up at Harkness State Park? People just walk around the one that is there and cross over to the piping plover area. Also, people come in from the other side too, as well. And then a question about Bluff Point. The question is, well, actually, this is about Milford Point. Here's what she wrote. With the ATV incident at Milford Point, were there any fines issued or for the off-leash dog? And then this is Brenda, I believe Brenda Rich, who's a Osprey Nation steward. I strongly chastised someone I know for having her horses on Bluff Point during the nesting season. After the fact, because she had posted photos, she claimed there are no signs. And then Brenda says there are signs that say no horses.
Stefan, do you want to take Milford Point first?
Sure,
And,
yeah.
okay.
I was just going to add
And
that.
I'll take the state beaches, I guess.
The horses actually is a good example, because when you read dogs or other animals within somebody's control, a lot of folks, dogs or other animal, who else is going out? Horses. You have people bringing horses out. We have actually people walking cats out there sometimes. Hey, power to them, walk them somewhere else, please, not on the beaches. But Milford Point, no, unfortunately, there were no tickets given out. It did go documented with Milford PD and the environmental conservation officers. So we do have reports of this. Hopefully this coming year, because now we actually have this bill, we might start to see some tickets being given, but those specific events, there were no repercussions.
Yeah, we have the laws on the books, but enforcement is going to be the issue. I don't think that it's going to be hard to get the municipal police department at Milford to walk the beaches and ticket somebody unless they're pressured by the mayor. And then the NCON, the DEP conservation officers, are so spread out thinly, so across Connecticut, that by the time something happens, they're long gone. So enforcement I think is going to be one of our biggest next issues.
And that's one of the things that the Alliance is doing a lot more of
Right.
now and last year and the coming years, is we're working closer and closer now with these municipal police departments and NCON. We're even going as far as holding training sessions with some of the field staff and NCON to make sure that everybody's on the same page about what laws and where to enforce, so that when we do have a field staff or somebody come across one of these issues, they are able to call if somebody's in the area, get a timely response, and write a ticket for these infractions.
So as Miley and Stefan both mentioned, that is a project we are working on. We're piloting this year, and we'll be working on expanding in future years, but it's enforcing these rules. And I know we're getting close out of time, but folks, when people go in these closed areas, we put the signs up, we put the fencing. It's just all the human disturbance we've talked about. That's why it takes all our volunteers and techs to be out there to remind folks, there are signs that say no dogs, no horses, or stay away, but folks are still going in there. So it really takes a village to protect these birds every year.
And there's a lot of players, which is why the Alliance is there, federal, state, and town or city. So everyone's, very happy with how everyone's working together right now. And just
Absolutely.
hoping to continue that.
Absolutely. Beth, Stefan, Miley, thank you so much for all that you're doing for the shorebirds. Everybody who joined us today, you can do your part. Sign up for the volunteering, sign up for training, monitor, be careful, watch your birds. Let us know if you see birds that are nesting outside of our fenced-in areas, because we want to make sure we're protecting them. Had a pretty good breeding year this year, and we're really looking forward to doing the same again in 2024. So let's all protect these important birds that are using our shorelines to breed on, and let's be friends with them. We have an additional Young, Gifted, and Wild About birds coming up later in March, and we hope that you'll be joining us for that. And just again, thank you for joining us today, and I hope you have a lovely day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.